Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And I'm joined today by Brooke. Brooke, can you please share a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure, thanks for having me. So my name's Brooke Johnson. I am with Ivanti, which is a global software company. I'm the chief legal counsel, so head lawyer, but I also am the senior vice president of human resources and security. So kind of wear a
Mhm.
lot of hats that touch a lot of different parts of the business.
Mhm. We're going to talk today about generative AI. Can you tell me a little bit more the broad picture of how Ivanti adopted generative AI, what the broad journey was, and then we'll dive into the legal aspects of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of years ago, like everyone else, after ChatGPT came out, we sort of were assessing how it might impact our company. Not
Mhm.
just how we might integrate it with products, but how do we actually use it, and what does that mean? So in 2023, we as an executive team kind of decided to take the initiative with setting out for the company the really, I think, sort of like the guiding principles of
Mhm.
what AI would mean for Avanti and how we would
Mhm.
use it. So the way that we actually sort of structurally did that is we created um, an AI governance council.
Mhm.
There's a charter that was created by the executive team through the input of the executive team,
Mhm.
and really that was formed through a number of pretty, I'd say, fulsome conversations about AI and kind of what we thought.
Mhm.
Not that like the CEO or the CFO are
Mhm.
experts on how AI works, but really more like
Sure.
what do we think it means as a company to us? Are
Mhm.
we willing? I mean, questions like, are we willing to, eliminate jobs because we have an
Mhm.
AI tool that replaces it, right? Or is there
Mhm.
some sort of like investment in keeping people in the business, even if
Mhm.
like their specific job is changed? Do
Mhm.
we want to figure out a way to find other roles for them? How do we feel about using AI for recruiting, for
Mhm.
maybe monitoring employees, things like that.
Mhm.
So really, like it was I did a survey, I put out a survey, a lot of questions,
Mhm.
and then we talked about it, kind of, and really ultimately came to our guiding principles, and then the AIGC has sort of been tasked with
Mhm.
executing on those. So the AIGC exists, meets regularly, and it's a group of that's represented. It's
Mhm.
basically different areas of the company are represented. It is true that the head of the AIGC is someone from legal, but it's not like a legal
Mhm.
initiative. It's not a security initiative. It's
Mhm.
cross-functional. So there's, IT and privacy and
Mhm.
security and product, and just all the different, groups to make sure that
Mhm.
it's truly representative of the company. And then we have
Mhm.
subgroups. So, different committees, subcommittees that have different functions. So there's
Mhm.
training, there's compliance, there's intake, which is a really important
Mhm.
one because, the thing about AI is that, um, really, the thing about AI is that it's not something that you can just sort of spin up and then leave it, right?
Sure.
So at Avanti, we actually started thinking of the process of reviewing AI for our internal
Mhm.
use as how would we evaluate and hire an employee?
Mhm.
So, when you hire an employee, you can't just hire someone, put them in their role, and then leave them to run on their own,
Mhm.
right? You have like a manager, you're sort of investing in their development, you're making sure that they're doing the right things, you're supervising them.
Mhm.
And so we really sort of started talking about it and thinking about it that way, which I think was an interesting and frankly a nice way to address
Mhm.
AI internally, because
Mhm.
it is a great tool, but it's not a it's not something that can just run on its own. It actually has to
Mhm.
be a tool with human supervision that can be
Mhm.
useful. So so that's how we're still doing things. The IGC has been
Mhm.
very successful. The intake process, very successful. It was important,
Mhm.
along with that, to really socialize this concept with the employees to make sure everyone understood that we had the AIGC, that we have this intake
Mhm.
review process. You can't just turn on AI functionality in a tool
Mhm.
without it going through security, privacy, and legal
Mhm.
review. And then, also there has to be an analysis of the return on investment because there was really, I mean, even just, so what are we, 2025? Even, thinking a year ago, I think there was still so much like exciting, there was like hype. And if something,
Yeah.
like anything could be labeled with having Gen AI and people could charge twice as much for it, and
Mhm.
every single tool that we already have, it's like, oh, we've got Gen AI.
Mhm.
And I know that I have some, contacts in the community where it just felt like they had acquired all of these tools, and ultimately like weren't receiving the payoff. And so that's also,
Oh.
I'd say, an important part of where we are is
Mhm.
making sure that we're thoughtfully enabling Gen AI in any of our internal
Mhm.
tools, making sure that we're using it correctly, and again, supervising it.
Now, you have legal heading this council. Tell me a little bit more about why you chose to make that decision rather than having technology head the council, or somebody else head the council, or operations head the council. Why do you have legal heading the council?
Probably because I was the one who was kind of driving it. So I picked someone on my team who had faith in that I knew
Mhm.
could kind of help move things along. Because in some
Mhm.
ways, you know, ultimately, I think it would be great to rotate the head out, right? And maybe a product person or
Mhm.
someone goes into the head. But I think when you're getting things off the ground, sometimes that's just
Mhm.
like the way, internal, just internal operations. I picked somebody who I knew would actually move things forward and hold people
Ah.
accountable and kind of was able to cross-functionally, collaborate in order to create
Mhm.
the right structure. And it's worked. It's worked very well.
Mhm.
So yeah, but that's a great
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, curious about that. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more. So you're working on the legal aspects of generative AI. Tell me a little bit more about what are the main considerations you're focused on to address the legal aspects in particular.
Yeah, let me see if I could like really quickly summarize our values.
Hmm.
Um, so the first one is have intellectual curiosity about AI's applications to further Avanti's mission. The second is leverage AI responsibly across all areas of Avanti's business to ensure alignment with our core values. The third
Hmm.
is leverage AI for speed, efficiency, productivity, greater accuracy, and value creation for our customers. Fourth, be aware of and carefully consider potential shortcomings such as unintended bias, erroneous baseline data, ethical considerations when
Hmm.
considering any and all use of AI. And the last one is stay committed to retaining talented employees to guide our AI journey, understanding that reliable AI requires human oversight. So that's when I said kind of, we met as a
Hmm.
executive team several times. That's really what we came to. And um, those principles are what sort of fuel our AI um, analysis, really.
Hmm.
And I know that's not, none of those are well, there's some legal elements of that, right? Like the erroneous baseline data, bias, ethical considerations,
Hmm.
all those things. I think we have issues, that we have to monitor there. But yeah, that's just kind of how we manage
Hmm.
our AI. So I'm not sure if I answered your question. Can you tell me the question again?
Sure. So what are the specific legal considerations that you are been focusing on? You describe a little bit more bias and so on, but tell me a little bit more about what legal considerations you want to address.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, I think this is such an evolving area of the law, right?
Hmm.
Is how um are governments going to regulate? Obviously, the EU, the answer is
Hmm.
yes. And I kind of like the way the EU is approaching it. I don't think that we'll see anything in the United States for a while,
Hmm.
but because we're a
Yeah,
global company, we do end up having to, like a lot, I mean,
hmm,
all the big AI companies, it's like are having to navigate the situation with Europe, right?
sure.
With Europe kind of being out there in front of things. I think too interestingly, the before the EU AI Act was even really like
Hmm.
something you saw some of the different countries regulating AI through privacy. And
Hmm.
that's where I do think that's such an important
Hmm.
part of managing AI. I see that as
Hmm.
really sort of a key piece of how we're going to move forward. We're not going to
Hmm.
put the toothpaste back in the tube on AI. There's just no chance on Gen AI. And what does that mean for people? So when you think about like bias and erroneous data and the ethics of AI, so much of that actually hinges on data because data is an important piece of AI. The important piece of AI, maybe one of the most important pieces. And if you don't have transparency information about how your data was, used or how, like why, something is happening, I mean, that's chaotic, right? So one example that I can think of and that I, am personally concerned about and check in about this and feel good about the tool that that we've chosen for our recruiting. But if you have a recruiting tool fueled by Gen AI that is biased, how do you know? Right. I mean, it's just such a black box, right? It's like you hear about people applying to like thousands of jobs and being very qualified and never getting, escalated. Is that just because there are so many applicants, or is it because a tool is weeding out all people with brown eyes? Like you don't, those kinds of things, and having information about that is super important. And I think on the Ivanti side, we can be responsible about how we implement and we monitor our AI. From a legal perspective, I haven't seen a ton of it yet, but I think we will eventually see customers demanding, the same kind of like transparency and responsibility. I think those ultimately will flow through contract terms. And then of course, there's just going to be navigating, global laws. So
That makes sense.
So interesting areas to watch, definitely.
Now, as we finish up, I'm curious, you mentioned you've been focusing on ROI from generative AI. Can you tell me what are the kind of metrics that you're using to measure ROI?
Sorry, say that again. ROI?
What are the metrics? Yeah, the return on investment. You said you're focusing on the return on investment.
Okay. Yes. So we actually got pretty granular about it. So in sort of rolling out like specific tools within specific teams, tracking the hours saved, right? And I don't know that that's like magical science or like specific science, but I think you can kind of guess. You're like, okay, I couldn't attend this meeting. That was an hour of my time. I went back and I read, the Copilot summary. That took me 5 minutes. So we actually had to have a team that is sort of focused on that and trying to quantify hours saved or dollar saved. So and this is probably not my topic, but I know you're going to be speaking with one of my colleagues, Sterling. He's, with the support team, you can actually get a little bit more detail about, dollar saved, time saved, things like that. So I think that is, an important thing to do. Unless it's just like all fun and games and whatever, and you can just buy all the tools you want. There's a cost to the business in actually acquiring the tool. There's a cost sometimes to people to train them. So are you actually getting the output and the benefit of the tool, And so it's, yeah, we actually are sort of tracking that on a and again, where we've done that, it's more like we're doing a little test. So we'll, like a test for like a specific team, and we can kind of focus on a team because it takes time out of employees' days to respond to surveys and things like that. But yeah, that's kind of how we've been doing it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, Brooke. This was very helpful.
Yeah, it was very nice to meet you. Happy to be here. So thanks.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out the show and leave a review. It helps other people discover the show and helps us improve the show. And if you have any questions, email me at gleb, Gleb, @disasteravoidanceexperts.com.